After I sold my house to give my son €150,000, he stopped the car at a deserted train station and abandoned me there. At 75, I, Elodie, thought I had lived a complete life. My husband, a brilliant antique dealer, had passed away a few years prior, leaving me with a peaceful existence in Lyon. My greatest joy now was the weekly video calls with my only son, Antoine, and his family. I could spend hours watching my two adorable grandchildren, Sophie and Leo, through the screen. Recently, they had started talking about me moving in with them. "Mother, you're getting old. It's dangerous to live alone," Isabel, his wife, would often say with a worried look. "We truly want to take care of you," Antoine would chime in. "That's right, Mother. The chalet in the mountains is spacious, the air is fresh, and you'll have the grandchildren doting on you. It will be much better for your health." Those words warmed my heart immensely. I had always refused, not wanting to be a burden, but I was genuinely touched by their filial piety. That peaceful life shattered on a stormy night. The phone rang at midnight. It was Antoine. His voice on the other end was broken, panicked. "Mother, everything's fallen apart." My heart constricted. He sobbed, explaining that his business had gone bankrupt. "But the worst part," he said, "was that the bank was about to seize the family's most precious asset, the old chalet in the Alps. That chalet. It wasn't just a house. It was where my husband had proposed to me. It was where Antoine had taken his first steps. It held the soul of our family. "I need €150,000, Mother," he whispered, his voice full of despair. "Only that amount can save our family's heritage." I sat motionless in the dark, listening to the rain beat against the window. Family heritage. Those two words struck me deeply. My heart broke at the despair in my son's voice. "Antoine, calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. I'll find a way." "But how, Mother?" he despaired. "We have nothing left, unless," he stammered, "unless you sell your house in Lyon." And then he immediately dismissed the idea. "No, Mother, forget it. I'm crazy. Even if I go bankrupt, I would never want you to lose your home. Absolutely not. I'll figure it out myself." Hearing my son's nobility, that he would rather lose everything than burden his mother, my heart ached even more. How could a mother stand by and watch her good son fall apart? And then, an idea flashed in my mind. Their offer, my moving in. "Wait, Antoine," I called him back. What if I sell the house, and I can move in with you, as you've always wished?" "Of course, Mother," he said immediately, his voice filled with joy and relief. "That would be wonderful. That way, you help me, and we get to take care of you. Our whole family will be together." Those words, at midnight, amidst the storm and despair, seemed like a perfect, preordained solution. This wasn't a sacrifice. This was a reunion. "All right," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I will sell the house. I will move in with you." The next morning, I called Mr. Martin, my family lawyer, to begin the process of selling the house. After I explained the situation and my intention to transfer the entire sum to Antoine, he hesitated for a moment. "Madame Elodie," he said, his voice professional and cautious, "for a large financial transaction between family members like this, to ensure transparency and avoid any future legal complications regarding taxes or inheritance, I strongly advise you to structure it as a loan agreement. This is just a standard procedure to protect all parties." I didn't fully understand all those complex legal matters. I only knew that I wanted to help my son as quickly and properly as possible. If Mr. Martin, whom my husband had always trusted, said this was what needed to be done, then I would follow his advice. "And to formalize the loan agreement," he continued, "we will need collateral. The chalet in the Alps, which is still in your name, would be the most logical choice. Yes, sir. Please do whatever you think is best, I replied. When Antoine came to the lawyer's office to sign the papers, he seemed a little surprised to see a loan agreement. Mother, what is this? It's just a formality, Antoine, I said softly. Mr. Martin says it will be better for all of us legally in the future. I don't really understand it myself. You just need to sign it. He looked at me, then at Mr. Martin, who nodded in confirmation. Yes, Mother, if you say so. He quickly signed the papers without reading them carefully. A few weeks later, the house in Lyon was sold. The entire amount was transferred to his account. As per the agreement with the new owner, I had 1 month to clear out and arrange my belongings. I began packing my life into cardboard boxes, my heart full of anticipation for the day of reunion. But throughout that month, something changed. Antoine's calls became less frequent. When I called, he often didn't answer. When he called back, his voice seemed distant. The video calls with the grandchildren also felt less natural. I could hear Isabel whispering beside him, as if prompting the children. Say you love Grandma, I overheard once. The warm connection I once felt was slowly cooling. Perhaps they were busy renovating the chalet for my arrival, I reassured myself. They must want to surprise me. Just in the final week before I had to move out, Antoine suddenly called, his voice unusually cheerful. Mother, everything's fine now, he exclaimed. The business is out of danger. We want to do something to repay you. This weekend we'll drive down to pick you up for a week at the chalet. Leave your belongings. The moving truck will bring them up next week. Consider this a welcome vacation to your new home. I was so happy I almost cried. All my doubts, all my anxieties vanished. It turned out I had worried for nothing. My son was still my devoted child. I thought the storm had truly passed, and this was the beginning of a happy new life. The fateful journey began on a Saturday morning. Their car drove along winding mountain roads. The children chattered in the back seat. Isabel sat beside me, constantly asking questions. Everything seemed perfect. By noon, they stopped the car at a small, old, deserted train station on the mountainside. Look, Mother, Isabel said, pointing to an old wooden bridge spanning the tracks. It's so beautiful. Let's take a family picture there as a souvenir, shall we? Great idea, Antoine chimed in. I happily agreed. Isabel asked me to step onto the bridge first to frame the shot. I smiled, stepping onto the old wooden planks, listening to the stream gurgling below. And then I heard a train whistle, growing closer. I turned around, and I froze. Antoine and Isabel weren't holding a camera. They were rushing to usher Sophie and Leo onto a train that was slowly beginning to pull away from the station. The train door slammed shut right behind them. I stood there, stunned, unable to believe my eyes. Through the window, I saw my son's face. He wasn't panicked, nor remorseful. His gaze met mine, cold and utterly devoid of emotion. The train sped up and disappeared around a bend. I was left alone, in the desolate mountains. They had taken everything from me. My home, my money, and even my love. Now, having outlived my usefulness, they had abandoned me in this remote place, perhaps to die of hunger and cold, a death no one would ever know. The play had ended. I don't know how long I stood on that bridge. The silence of the mountains suddenly became terrifying. The cold sensation didn't come from the wind, but from the naked betrayal. Fortunately, an old train guard, perhaps hearing the unusual train whistle, came out to check. He saw me standing there, trembling, and kindly drove me back to a small village in the valley on his old motorbike. That night, in a simple guest house, the shock hit. I almost collapsed. I had lost everything. My son, my grandchildren, my home, and my last savings. But then, as the image of Antoine's cold eyes through the train window reappeared, my grief was quickly replaced by something else. A chilling rage, an unyielding will to survive. They thought they could discard me like an old object. They were wrong. The next morning, the first thing I did wasn't to call a lawyer or the police. I needed to confirm one thing myself. I went to the local bank in the village, where I knew my family still banked. I presented myself as the legal owner of the chalet and inquired about the debt Antoine had mentioned. The teller checked the records, then looked up at me with a puzzled expression. "Madam Reynolds, I don't quite understand. This chalet has no debt whatsoever." "No debt?" I asked again, my heart beginning to pound. "Are you sure?" "Yes, madam. I am certain," he said, turning his computer screen towards me. "According to our records, it was fully paid off 7 years ago, right after your husband passed away." I stared at the screen. Paid off 7 years ago? A shiver ran down my spine. The entire story about the failing business, about the bank about to seize it, it was all a lie. A perfectly crafted lie to trick me into selling my house. But why? Why would they put on such an elaborate and cruel act just for 150,000 euros? The intuition of an antique dealer's wife, who had encountered all sorts of scams, told me that a much more horrific truth was hidden behind all of this. Immediately after leaving the bank, I called Mr. Martin, my lawyer. I told him everything, from being abandoned to the truth about the chalet. He was as stunned as I was. "Madam Elodie," he said, his voice full of concern, "this is no longer simple. I think we need to act carefully." On his advice, I hired a local private investigator, a man named Dubois, a former police chief, who had a keen eye and knew every corner of this mountain region. I gave him everything I had: photos of Antoine's family, information about Isabelle, and asked him to find out why they had to put on such a complex act. A few days later, Mr. Dubois met me at the guest house. He didn't say much, just placed a thick folder on the table. "Madam Reynolds," he said, his voice low, "I think you should sit down." I opened the folder, and my whole world collapsed, once again, but this time even more devastatingly. The first page contained information about Isabelle. Her real name wasn't Isabelle. She was a washed-up actress who had played a few supporting roles on television and had a long history of petty scams. She was not Antoine's wife. The next page was about Sophie and Leo. Their birth certificates showed they were the children of another woman, a member of Isabelle's syndicate. They were not my grandchildren. The smiles, the hugs, the "I love you, Grandma" over the phone. It was all fake, part of a carefully rehearsed script. And finally, Antoine, my son. Mr. Dubois had found out that he wasn't bankrupt at all. On the contrary, he was the mastermind of a gang that specialized in pretending to be a happy family. They targeted lonely, wealthy seniors, creating an illusion of reunion and love to slowly drain their assets. My case, the deception of his own mother, was just one of their many cruel schemes. I sat there, stunned, staring at the papers on the table. My son was not just a scammer. He was a monster. The happy family I had believed in, the grandchildren I had loved. It was all a perfectly staged illusion. This pain was no longer that of a betrayed mother. It was the pain of realizing that all my love had been given to ghosts. Mr. Dubois, the investigator, looked at me with concern. "Madam Reynolds, we have enough evidence to go to the police. They won't be able to deny it." I shook my head. "Not yet, sir." Go to the police? Arrest them? That was too easy, too simple for what they had done. They had turned my love into a tool, turned my heart into a stage. And they thought they would get away with it easily, I thought. They believed that, no matter what, Antoine was still my son, and a mother would never completely destroy her child. They were counting on the very love they had trampled upon. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I didn't just want justice. I wanted them to experience the feeling of loss, the feeling of being deceived, the feeling when something they believed was theirs slipped through their grasp. And then, A memory flashed in my mind. An old story my husband, David, had told me a long time ago. I remembered one winter evening, sitting by the fireplace in the chalet. David pointed to the ash-grey marble, which looked simple and rustic, lining the fireplace. He said that the architect who designed this chalet, an old friend of his, was also a talented sculptor. The entire marble section was not cut and assembled slabs. It was a unique sculpture, carved from a single block of stone, mimicking the cliffs of the Alps. The artist's signature was hidden in a discreet corner. With the experience of an antique dealer's wife, I knew how much such a piece, by an artist documented in old art references, would be worth. It could be worth more than the chalet itself. And I knew one thing for sure. Antoine's gang had no idea about this secret. To them, the chalet was just an old wooden house. They only saw the walls, the roof, and the land. They didn't see the soul. They didn't see the true value hidden right before their eyes. A plan began to form in my mind. I had my weapon. Not a gun, but knowledge. Not revenge, but a chess game. And I would make the final move. Having formulated my plan, I called Mr. Martin, my lawyer, again. I didn't tell him about the secret of the fireplace, but gave clear instructions. A few days later, Antoine received a call from Mr. Martin. I wasn't there, but I could imagine the conversation. Mr. Martin, with a weary and resigned voice, informed him that his client, Madame Elodie, had completely broken down, that she was too old and tired to pursue any legal battle, that she just wanted peace. And then Mr. Martin made a final offer, one I knew they couldn't refuse. Madame Elodie says she will sign over full ownership of the chalet to you. I imagined Mr. Martin's voice. She is willing to give up everything. I knew there would be a pause on the other end of the line, a surprise at such an easy victory. However, Mr. Martin continued, she has only one condition. She wants to see the grandchildren one last time, to say goodbye, at the chalet. The trap was perfectly laid. It played into both their greed and their complacency. They thought I was completely defeated, that my love for fake grandchildren had blinded me. They thought they had victory firmly in their grasp. As I expected, they agreed immediately. The meeting was arranged for the weekend, right at the chalet in the mountains, which they believed would soon be theirs. The stage for the final act was set. That weekend, I arrived at the chalet early. I sat by the fireplace, where a fire crackled. Mr. Martin, my lawyer, sat opposite me. Beside him was an elderly man, wearing horn-rimmed glasses, looking rather austere. That was Monsieur Dubois, the leading art critic from Paris whom I had gone to great lengths to invite. When Antoine's car and his family pulled up outside, I took a deep breath, putting on my final performance. They entered, their faces beaming, completely undisguised. They saw me sitting with two unfamiliar men. "Mother," Antoine said, his voice falsely sweet. "Is everyone ready?" Isabelle glanced at Mr. Dubois with curiosity. "Ah," I said, my voice weak. "This is Mr. Dubois. Just an appraiser to finalize the paperwork for the house, you know, for proper procedure." They nodded, completely unsuspecting. Antoine pulled out a stack of papers from his leather briefcase. "Then let's sign quickly, Mother," he said, placing the deed transferring full ownership of the chalet on the table right in front of me. I picked up the pen, and at that exact moment, just as planned, Monsieur Dubois suddenly stood up. "Unbelievable," he exclaimed, his voice filled with astonishment. He didn't look at us, but rushed straight to the fireplace. "It's real. It's truly it." He reached out, almost caressing the marble. A masterpiece by Auguste Dubois, a sculpture the art world thought was long lost. Antoine and Isabelle exchanged bewildered glances. "Madame Reynolds," Mr. Dubois turned to me, his eyes gleaming. "Do you know you own a treasure? This marble piece alone, its appraised value is no less than 2 million euros. Antoine's and Isabel's faces shifted from triumph to confusion, then to utter horror. They looked at the fireplace, then at the transfer deed on the table, then back at me. They realized they weren't just trying to steal an old wooden house. They had almost thrown away an enormous fortune they knew nothing about. Just then, the door burst open. The private investigator, Mr. Dubois, walked in, followed by two uniformed police officers. "Antoine," I said, my voice no longer weak, but cold as ice. "The appraisal is over. Now it's time for the law." Mr. Dubois held up a small voice recorder. Everything had been recorded. Their play had truly ended. Antoine's fraud ring was busted. With irrefutable evidence from Mr. Dubois' investigation and the audio recording of the transfer deed signing performance at the chalet, they faced severe sentences. Antoine, my son, who had tried to discard his mother after draining everything, received a long prison term. Isabel and the other accomplices fared similarly. They lost the game they thought they controlled. Many advised me to sell the chalet and the sculpture. "It holds too many painful memories," they said. But I did not. Instead, I decided to turn it into a symbol of rebirth. I used the very money they would have stolen to establish a charity in my late husband's name, the David Reynolds Foundation. The chalet in the Alps was no longer a personal asset, but had become a retreat and an inspiration, a scholarship dedicated to talented young artists lacking opportunities. What was once the stage for a cruel conspiracy now became a nurturing ground for beautiful dreams. Yes, I lost a son, a painful truth I will carry for the rest of my life. But in that loss, I found myself again. I rediscovered Elodie, the strong, intelligent woman who, with her husband, built everything from scratch. I proved that wisdom and strength are never bound by age. One winter afternoon, I, Elodie, sat alone in the cozy chalet, not as an abandoned mother, but as the true mistress of this place. I sat in the familiar leather armchair, beside the €2 million marble fireplace. The fire crackled, reflecting a sparkling light onto the glass of red wine in my hand. Through the large window, I could see the majestic Alps, covered in pristine white snow under the sunset. I was no longer alone. Occasionally, the laughter of the young artists staying here echoed from afar. But in this moment, I savoured my own tranquility. I took a sip of wine, feeling the bittersweet taste fade. I was not a victim. I was the victor in the chess game of my own life. And this victory tasted truly sweet. Use arrow up and arrow down to select a turn. Enter to jump to it, and escape to return to the chat.